Hello everyone, this is it. The GameCube is real. A decade in the making, Valve have finally revealed the long-anticipated Steam machines. Of course, this is not the first time they've tried to do Steam machines, but what it is the most serious one. It's a culmination of work on the Steam Deck, the Steam OS platform, and even the Steam Store. And that means that once more, Valve are coming for your living room. But I think this time, they're set up to be a hell of a lot more successful. They'll be doing it the same way that they took over PC gaming in the first place, and if rumors are to be believed, that really is a true statement, because apparently, they'll be launching a new Half-Life game in this thing. I don't know if that much is true, but these are wild times, this will shake up the industry, and to Gabe, I suppose, happy sailing. You may not know this, but Steam machines actually already existed. They failed 10 years ago. Basically, a dozen different versions were announced in 2015, alongside a controller, the Steam Link, and the Vive headset. And by 2015, they were hailed as the future of gaming. Basically, a living room PC that Valve would build alongside companies with experience like Alienware. They actually had an early version of Steam OS, which brought Linux to the masses. They had this fancy new controller with trackpads to replace the keyboard and mouse, but it was honestly a disaster. The bespoke Linux operating system caused, quote, 21 to 58% frame drops. That's pretty bad, and that was happening in the very few games that actually supported it. One of the core reasons why they decided to do Steam machines back then was the unmitigated disaster that was Windows 8. It truly looked like the desktop PC format was going in a bad direction. So because of that, Steam machines were going to be a thing. But obviously by the time they came out, Windows 10 was a thing, and Windows 10 was not as bad as Windows 8. So the average consumer felt less pressure to shift over. Then there's the controller. It was divisive. I have a soft spot for it personally. I was actually playing World of Warcraft on the damn thing, but it was divisive. Then there's the Steam Link. It was a $30 home streaming device. Pretty cool little thing. You could basically play games in your living room without needing a whole new PC because it would just stream from your PC. And if we're to take that all in, what we see is a real ambitious set of hardware, just not really that well positioned in the market. As an example, the game business now estimates that fewer than 400,000 Steam machines sold in total. Soon, hardware partners abandoned the project. There were poor sales, poor partnerships with Valve, and a lack of interest. And that led to Valve retreating from everything but VR. Obviously now, 10 years have passed, and things are very different indeed. And I'll add to that, even down to Windows massively pissing everyone off. I don't know if you've seen the recent Windows 11 headlines, they're not good, and obviously for Valve, that is amazing. Let's talk about the new hardware. We're really seeing history repeat, where we get a new controller, a new VR headset, and the Steam machines. These are all announced at once, and they're going to be shipping in early 2026. Now, the controller essentially builds on the Steam Deck, and then some of the things that they've learned from their VR headsets, where I can certainly say the haptics were absolutely god tier. So, it polishes the design, it adds in some new features, we've got magnetic drift-resistant sticks, better gyro support, and then there's the Steam frame. It's adding more remote streaming with optimized eye tracking. That's all in a way that should be fairly amazing for performance. I don't want to undersell how cool the eye tracking rendering stuff is, but what it also does is huge. It brings ARM support to Steam OS. That is absolutely vital. I do say that as someone with a laptop that is running an ARM chipset. And the thing that we're basically seeing with, like, Apple Silicon is absurd performance for the heat and for the wattage. That, of course, makes it fantastic for a headset, but it does also have me thinking, well, Steam OS supports ARM. There are many laptops out there that also support ARM, so this could end up being fairly large for Steam. But obviously the thing we really need to talk about is the Steam machines. Those have set the internet alight, calling it the GameCube, an amazing name. And it is really Steam coming for the living room. Now, the device itself is a black 6-inch cube PC with a removable faceplate and a customizable light bar. Now, when we look at the breakdowns, you can actually see that it is 75% cooling unit by volume. Almost in a way, it's like a Mac Studio, but for gaming, something like that. It's a gorgeous piece of hardware, and we've even seen it have a e-ink front display. That's something that Valve had whenever they were building it, but I've got to imagine that when this is a real device that we can all go and buy, that we'll probably see strong aftermarket support for things like that. Now, of course, in theory, you can build a competitor to this thing right now. You can just go and build a mini ITX PC. You may be wondering then, what is the big deal with this? Well, I'll lay it out. This is a mini PC that is running SteamOS, just like the Steam Deck. Now that's the same SteamOS that this year was shown to run games better than Windows. But the difference is that this is on a machine that is, according to Valve, 6 times more powerful than a Steam Deck. And to quote one of their engineers who was talking about the performance targets, our benchmark has always been that it should have enough performance to play every game on Steam at 4K 60 when you do some sort of upscaling like FSR. That does sound ambitious. That being said, I think the phrase some sort of upscaling is certainly going to be doing a lot of work for some games there, but that does get us onto something else, and that is price point. This is where things are going to be extremely challenging. We don't know what the price is. A lot of people are hoping about 400 USD. If it was that, it would be truly disruptive, but there are many roadblocks to a price like that. First off, there's the fairly obvious with tariffs, because look, the situation there could actually change over time. That's likely one of the reasons why Valve doesn't want to commit to pricing here. But another one is what we're seeing go on with RAM. Basically, the RAM markets are getting really crazy, prices are absolutely spiking, and the risk for Valve would be that they could commit to a price right now, but actually find that when it comes time to do their real massive volume production runs, maybe the price of some of that RAM will have went up. So that's probably one of the reasons why we're not seeing pricing, because basically those supply chains are a little bit of a nightmare for everyone involved now. Though we need to remember that it's not releasing in a vacuum. It's going under your TV, ideally, right? It'll be running games at 4K. So it's basically just competing with like the PS5, maybe the PS5 Pro, certainly probably not against the Pro in terms of raw horsepower, to be very clear, and the Xbox. Those things have all had price hikes, which does mean that they probably won't even have to go super low in the price. Even if they were matching the price of some of their competitors, there would be a number of very compelling reasons to go with Valve over one of the consoles. Just in terms of like aesthetics and ergonomics, I mean, it's got an internal power supply. There's no laptop style power brick. It will just pop in there very sleekly and play the majority of games just like a PS5 or an Xbox. Just that now, unlike 10 years ago with the old wave of Steam machines, loads of once exclusives are now just actually on PC. So it's not even like it's got to face that hurdle as much. So games-wise, it'll run literally everything in your library that is currently Steam Deck compatible. And of course, that's really the big thing here. Valve have been working on this device for ages, and with the Steam Deck, they've already laid the groundwork for it. Because Valve did actually spend those 10 years from the first wave of Steam machines to these pretty much fixing everything that went wrong last time. They're clearly not making the same mistakes again, and that all starts with SteamOS. That's because on a firmware level, SteamOS has just gone from strength to strength. There is a reason why Valve's marketing is highlighting using the Steam machine as just a regular PC as well. SteamOS is honestly awesome. But in gaming terms, the Proton compatibility layer is what really matters here, because it just runs window games. Your games will just work. And I know pulling a Todd Howard and saying it just works is a little bit silly sometimes, but this is one of those rare cases where Proton really is that good. And in some cases, the games may even run better than they would in similar bits of Windows hardware. We've actually seen that proven on the Lenovo Legion Go S. Basically, that's a handheld that is available in both a Windows and a SteamOS version. And the SteamOS version basically tends to run things a bit better, so you get a few more frames. Now, whenever these Steam machines come out, you may have to wait a little bit to see a verified for Steam machine badge in games. That's just because developers will have to do a bit of work, right? A bit of optimization. But what is good here is the devs are not compiling a build natively for SteamOS, right? There's a lot of very dev-friendly things here. So you should expect generally better performance, but I'd also imagine that this will go particularly hard for what it is. Basically, it's a fairly clear hardware target, it's one that's fairly well marketed, and for any game developer, it's also extremely marketable to be able to say, hey, this runs amazing on a Steam machine. So you'll probably get benefits out of the gate, but things could get even better when we start seeing verified verified for Steam Machine badges appear all over the place once devs actually get the time to do optimizations and go through that certification process. Though if you ask me, that stuff is really just the beginning. You see, so many of us just play Steam on our desktop PC, right? And that means that we often end up not really appreciating all the benefits that are there. So you've got Steam Cloud support, which means your saves can follow you between your main PC, your deck, and your Steam machine. Your peripherals and every controller and USB device are compatible with Steam's input mapping. You won't even have to pay for online functionality. That's another huge thing. And especially huge for the console market, because every other console requires a monthly subscription to play online games. To us in PC, that's an absolutely goofy, ridiculous, silly thing. To console people, that is basically normal. So I'd certainly imagine that's a strong wedge issue that Valve could actually use for the more value-oriented people. And a through line between everything I just said there is that it all works along with the framing of this as a console. And that's the whole point of a console. It's meant to just work. Single bit of hardware that you buy, it plays games, there's no bullshit. I think that's essentially what they're going to get if we have a deck-like experience, and I do imagine that we will. So product-wise, I think they are playing an entirely different game than the game they were playing back in 2015 with the original Steam machines, where now everything is in-house. They're not relying on third-party manufacturers to ship on schedule. Consumers don't have 15 different versions to pick from. There are 2 versions to pick from. The only difference is the built-in storage. So effectively, this takes the Steam Deck approach and just applies it to a PC, giving you a console-like experience. And we know that experience works because we've seen the Steam Deck work. Now, the last estimates put that device at around 4 million sales by February 2025. 4 million. That's a lot of testing. It's a lot of refining. But the Steam Deck may also suggest the few ways where this device could come up short. I have to imagine this is the type of thing Valve will want to be on top of. So one of the biggest responses to this has been that Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft had better watch out. Funny, I don't actually think Nintendo really need to watch out, they just have a strong moat, but for the other two, yeah, I can see them having to watch out because in a way, yes, there is a brand new console coming, and it's one that's going to reignite the console war and force everybody to improve. In an ideal world, lest Valve come in and steal all their lunch money. But the problem with trying to compete with PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox is that in terms of raw scale, Valve are not even in the same, league. Now, I think there is no doubt that the Steam machine will succeed. I don't think this will be a repeat of 2015. But Valve are distributing this the same way that they are distributing the deck, which is fairly good in many ways. It's one of the things that actually I think ensures the price is as strong as it is. But that also could be a little bit of a problem, because the biggest thing preventing Steam from taking a chunk out of the console market is they're not going to be in an electronics store. At least the Steam Deck's not an electronics store, so will people be able to go into Best Buy and just pick up one of these on a whim? Will they be able to buy it on Amazon? I would have to imagine probably not. Valve are going to distribute these devices from their store directly. This gives them control, and it also gives them whatever cut retailers would ask for, and that is huge. We've actually seen Gabe Newell directly talk about, well, the pain of getting the Steam Deck down to the price that it was. We know they were basically trying to go as low as they could. Obviously, a major part of that is optimizing the entire chain through to distribution. So in a world where you're not giving Jeff Bezos a bunch of money or Mr. Best Buy a bunch of money, well, then the console can be cheaper. Of course, you and I benefit from that. It means we get a cheaper console. But it also means the Steam machine can't possibly sell at the level of any existing console because those benefit from humongous distribution networks, even just say Amazon. And the Steam Deck actually proves this. The deck has sold 4 million copies in 3 years, which is absolutely incredible. But modern consoles outsell it by a factor of 20. It has not even reached the levels of the Sega Dreamcast in terms of sales. Plus, some of the same SteamOS issues do still persist. I mean, the memes may boast about not having Fortnite and not having Call of Duty, but the whole thing with no kernel-level anti-cheat is a real big problem for mass adoption. And it's another reason why some of the existing consoles can maintain their positions, because some of those big games would actually be blocked by this on an OS level. But I think if Valve is able to get around the anti-cheat thing, well, then we really could be talking. But what we'd be talking about would massively depend on price, and currently, I just have absolutely no answer for you. There'll probably be another video whenever we find out about pricing. But I would say that in a global economy where American tariffs or industry demands can spike hardware prices, sometimes seemingly out of nowhere, well, Valve can be forgiven for not confirming pricing too early. And I say that because even if they're comfortable taking a loss, maybe something that Counter-Strike knife sales alone could fund, the value does actually matter here, like the value for the end user. I think the use case for hardcore gaming enthusiasts like you or I at home will entirely depend on how this price feels. And I think Valve absolutely knows that. Yes, some people will get this instead of a console, but I think a lot of the initial sales are going to be people who love playing games on their PC and just want to extend that experience to another surface, much in the same way that they would have done with a Steam Deck. And that means that at least at the start, Valve does not need to completely dominate with these devices. All they need to do is hit their own internal goals and carve off exactly as much market as they want. Because at the end of the day, there are no public shareholders to hold them accountable, or you could say, to provide incentives to do silly things, right? Valve ultimately is in control of itself. And I think that explains why the vibes of these announcements have been so important. Quite obviously, the vibes are good, but they're also a little bit aggro. I think people want to see a lot of the other players in the market get disrupted. I want to see that as well. And I'll say, even with our analyst hats on, thinking about how this fits into the current very fractured industry, it is at the very least still Valve impressively addressing their past mistakes. It truly seems they learned from the failure of the initial Steam machines, and not in a way where they just wanted to shit out better Steam machines within 3 years. No, they pretty much spent a decade getting things right. That is impressive, and it's something we don't see enough of. They're basically making something cool that people still want, something that fills a niche in people's interests. And for me, more than anything, it's nice to be excited about a new technology, you know? There's no AI asterisks to this. Doesn't seem there are huge performance compromises. There isn't a new subscription fee attached to it. It seems this is just a cool bit of hardware designed to do one thing exceptionally well. And in 2025, I think that alone feels like a victory that is worth celebrating. But for the subjects of one of our previous videos, I think they'll be feeling a bit more complex about this. There's been some talk about Steam and whether it's a monopoly or not, and a recent survey that hit quite a lot of game executives, and we go into detail on it in this video.